Cam Newton has always been one of the most polarizing players in football. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, he was never judged the same way as his peers. He was called cocky, dramatic, arrogant, overhyped, labels that seemed to stick to him no matter how much he achieved. And the strangest part? Those labels never seemed to land on white quarterbacks with far less talent, far fewer accolades, and far weaker resumes. Cam wasn't just playing football, he was fighting against a narrative. One that seemed determined to box him in, strip him of credit, and rewrite his legacy before it was even written. And nothing brought that into focus more than the moment Paul Finebaum, one of the most recognizable voices in college football media, called Cam Newton the worst player Urban Meyer ever coached. It wasn't just a hot take. It wasn't just wrong. It felt intentional. Because that's not football talk. That's character assassination. That's planting a seed of doubt, designed to grow and shadow everything Cam has done. And when you line it up against the history of who Finebaum has gone after, the pattern becomes too obvious to ignore. Let's be real. Urban Meyer coached Aaron Hernandez. Urban Meyer coached players involved in multiple off-field scandals, from assault charges to academic fraud. Urban Meyer's roster was a minefield of controversies, yet somehow, Cam Newton is the one labeled the worst. A national champion, a Heisman winner, an NFL MVP. That's the guy Finebaum singles out. That's not just disrespectful, that's coded. That's a message, and it's a message Cam has heard his entire career. Because Finebaum has a history, and that history is full of attacks aimed not at players' performance, but at their character. And almost every time, those players have something in common. They're black, they're outspoken, and they refuse to play by the old rules of humility, obedience, and silence. When Deion Sanders suggested that college football needed an NIL salary cap to protect balance and stability, Finebaum didn't debate the idea. He didn't argue the merits. He went straight at Deion, calling him a hypocrite. Not engaging the message, but attacking the man. When Jameis Winston was still in college, Finebaum labeled him untouchable before he ever played an NFL snap. When Lamar Jackson was rewriting record books, Finebaum dismissed him as not being a real quarterback. And now, Cam Newton. Every time a black athlete steps into the spotlight with confidence and power, Finebaum's voice is right there. Not to uplift, not to analyze, but to undercut. And when it comes to white coaches and quarterbacks, the treatment is night and day. Nick Saban throws tantrums on the sideline, and Finebaum reveres him as a legend. Tim Tebow, who walked with the same confidence, is celebrated endlessly as faith-driven and humble. Dabo Swinney complains about NIL and locker room culture, and Finebaum nods in agreement. But when Deion Sanders says the exact same thing, suddenly he's reckless, dangerous, a problem. It's never about what's being said. It's always about who's saying it. And that brings us back to Cam Newton. Because Finebaum isn't the only one who's tried to control his story. From the very beginning, Cam's narrative was twisted. Ask most people what they remember about his time at Florida, and you'll hear the same recycled lie. Cam Newton was kicked out. But that's not the truth. Cam wasn't dragged out of Gainesville. He wasn't blackballed or indefinitely suspended. He made a decision. He transferred. And the reason he left had nothing to do with discipline or drama. It had everything to do with opportunity. Tim Tebow was the chosen one, the face of the program, and Urban Meyer wasn't going to hand those reins to anyone else, no matter how talented. So Cam did what thousands of players do every single year. He looked for a place where he could play, where he could lead, where he could grow. He bet on himself, and that choice shaped his entire career. Now let's address the so-called elephant in the room, the laptop incident. Cam has never denied it. It happened. But the way it's used, the way it's dragged out every single time his name comes up, tells you everything. It wasn't the reason he left Florida. It wasn't the end of his career. It wasn't even the story that defined him. Yet Finebaum and others wield it like a weapon, as if one mistake made as a young man should forever overshadow championships, MVPs, and historic seasons. And here's the truth that critics will never admit. If Cam had stayed quiet, waited behind Tebow, been the humble backup, they would have praised his character. But he didn't. He left. He rose. He won. And that's what they've never forgiven. Cam Newton didn't just bounce back, He rewrote the entire blueprint. After Florida, he could have disappeared. He could have been another name in the long list of wasted talent. That's what the system expected. That's what the critics wanted. But Cam went to Blinn College, a JUCO program in Texas, and he turned it into a launch pad. And what did he do there? He dominated. He put up video game numbers, led Blinn to a national championship, and did it with the same flair, confidence, and power that had been written off as problematic at Florida. He took a stopgap program and turned it into a national headline. And from there, Auburn came calling. What Cam did at Auburn is the stuff of legends. One of the greatest individual seasons in the history of college football. Over 4,000 yards of offense, 50 touchdowns, an SEC title, a Heisman Trophy, and a national championship. All in 1 year. All under the spotlight of a media that was waiting for him to fail. And here's the part that makes Finebaum's comments sting so much. Even in that season, even in his absolute peak, critics still found a way to twist the story. Finebaum claimed Cam nearly cost Auburn the championship, accusing him of ignoring his coach's instruction to take a knee and instead diving into the end zone for a touchdown, risking a fumble. He painted it as selfish, reckless, proof that Cam couldn't be trusted when it mattered most. But what actually happened? Cam himself has told the story. It wasn't freelancing. It wasn't ego. It was a decision made in the huddle, discussed with teammates, executed with confidence. And even if it hadn't worked, Auburn still had a timeout. The team was in control, and, oh yeah, they still won the national championship. Yet the moment gets twisted into a cautionary tale, because that's the pattern. When a black quarterback leads his way, calls his shots, and wins his games, it becomes a threat to the old guard. Cam didn't win with silence and humility. He won with swagger, with fire, with joy, and that confidence, that unapologetic greatness, scared the system. Fast forward to the NFL. Cam Newton becomes the face of the Carolina Panthers. He wins an MVP. He leads his team to the Super Bowl. He electrifies Sundays with his play and his celebrations. Kids across the country are dabbing in the end zone, copying his joy. But once again, the media twists the story. Instead of admiration, Cam gets suspicion. Instead of being uplifted, he's dissected. When he celebrates, he's selfish. When he smiles, he's arrogant. When he shows leadership, he's called immature. Meanwhile, Tebow's confidence is labeled leadership. Andrew Luck's stoicism is celebrated as genius. The double standard is blatant. And Finebaum's voice, along with others, became the megaphone for those criticisms. And then came Super Bowl 50, one of the biggest stages in sports. Cam was the league MVP, the face of the NFL, the quarterback who had carried the Panthers to a 15-1 season. But when the Panthers lost to the Denver Broncos, the narrative flipped instantly. Instead of focusing on how dominant he'd been all season, the media zeroed in on his post-game press conference, when Cam sat quietly, visibly upset, and walked off early. That one moment, that one press conference became the headline. He wasn't competitive. He was a sore loser. He wasn't passionate. He was immature. And yet, how many times have we seen other quarterbacks storm off the podium in frustration and get framed as fiery competitors? Tom Brady has done it. Aaron Rodgers has done it. Countless others have done it. But when Cam did it, it was framed as a character flaw. That's how deep the double standard runs. And still, even with all the criticism, Cam's impact was undeniable. He redefined what a quarterback could look like. 6'5", 250 pounds, running over linebackers, throwing bombs downfield, celebrating every touchdown like the game was meant to be fun. He wasn't just winning games, he was changing the culture. Kids wore his jerseys. Entire stadiums dabbed when he scored. He made football joyful, electric, and unapologetically his own. That's why Finebaum's comment hit so hard, because it wasn't just about football. It was about erasing that joy, undermining that impact, and planting doubt about everything Cam achieved. But here's where the story takes a turn, because Cam Newton, after years of being the target, is no longer just the player. He's the platform. He's the voice. When Finebaum called him the worst player Urban Meyer ever coached, Cam didn't respond with anger or theatrics. He responded with clarity. He looked into the camera and said 4 words. "You're lying, Paul. Please stop." No shouting, no personal attacks, just truth. And, in those words, Cam did something more powerful than any rebuttal. He exposed the entire strategy. Finebaum's comment wasn't just shade. It was part of a larger playbook. Discredit, distort, dismantle. The same playbook used on Deion Sanders when he dared to have an opinion about NIL. The same one used on Lamar Jackson when he redefined what a quarterback could look like. The same one used on Jameis Winston before he ever took an NFL snap. See, this isn't just about Cam. It's about an unspoken rule in American sports media. A rule that says black athletes can be great, but they can't act like it. They can dominate, they can win, they can even change the game. But they have to do it with humility, with obedience, with gratitude. They can't be too flashy, too confident, too loud about their greatness. From the moment Cam started dabbing, smiling, dancing, and owning his crown, the system lined him up to be torn down. Finebaum has been one of the loudest enforcers of that rule. But the truth is, Cam doesn't need his approval anymore. He never did. His legacy doesn't live in Finebaum's set. It lives in the millions of fans who watched him dominate. It lives in the kids who copied his celebrations. It lives in every young quarterback who saw someone who looked like them lead with swagger and change the game. Cam Newton is a Heisman Trophy winner. Cam Newton is a national champion. Cam Newton is an NFL MVP. He's not the worst player Urban Meyer ever coached. He's one of the most important players college football and the NFL have ever seen. And now, he's telling his own story. He doesn't need ESPN or CBS to clear the air. He doesn't need Finebaum's backhanded compliments. He has his own voice, his own platform, his own mic. And this time, he's not handing it back. Finebaum thought he could bury Cam under a narrative. Instead, he made his story louder. So let the record show. You can hate on the man, but you can't erase the legacy. Cam Newton already won. And no matter how many times the old guard tries to twist the story, the truth keeps shining through. The mic belongs to Cam now, and he's not giving it back.